Hey everybody, David Duford here at davidduford.com, where I help insurance agents like you become top producing insurance professionals. Thank you so much for joining me today on another installment of our role-playing and hot seat training development. If you've not seen any kind of training like this before, let me explain it to you. It's pretty simple. I learned really through the process of coaching at the end of 2019 the importance of actually rehearsing and memorizing and testing yourself to the scripting that I teach agents to use to sell final expense and anything related to that insurance-wise. So I'd never had a formal program designed to really just execute on memorizing the script and making sure that we've got everything we need in order to give ourselves the best chance of success. So that's why I'm doing these trainings now. So we do them twice a week. We do them Tuesday mornings at 9 a.m. and then also Friday at, lunchtime. So the whole idea behind this is to really give you the opportunity to duplicate what you would do if you were in the field, but understanding there's nothing at loss here, but still there's a little level of urgency, maybe nervousness, right? Because you're being called out on the spot. So it helps you just memorize the script and get good with it. So here's how I want to basically do today's training. So the first thing is, if you've got objections that you have struggled with or are frustrated about, go ahead and post them in the chat below. Or you can just jump in, unmute yourself and just say, hey, Dave, can we cover this topic? That's fine too if you can't reach your phone and type. But the goal of today's call is really just to review kind of the most common sales objections that we'll hear, and then also kind of go over a scripting process that I think is useful in order to overcome them. So one thing I'll ask you guys is if anybody is interested in being my role play hot seat, now is the time to indicate. You can either chat or you can take yourself off a microphone. I'll take anybody here as opposed to calling on you if you want to. So just unmute yourself, let me know. If not, then I'll start calling on you guys in order to get you going. So any volunteers, please pipe up now. So what we're going to do in today's conversation is really talk about a couple of different objections. I want to cover some early objections that we experience in the sales presentation, and then also cover some, of course, the objections at the end of the sales call and kind of learn how to handle them. So let's start with the knee-jerk objections. And I'm going to call on someone since I didn't hear anybody. Jason, you want to go? Are you there?
Sure, why not?
Hey, how you doing this morning, Jason?
Good, Dave. How about you, David?
I'm good. So let's talk about knee-jerk objections. So let me describe the situation. Again, what I'm going to do is I'm going to play, I'll play agent, you play prospect. And what I want you to do is basically act in the very beginning of the sales presentation. You know how people will say, hey, I'm not interested. I don't want to buy anything today. You know, I'm just curious in the information. You probably have gotten that. We all have, right?
Right.
Yeah. So I want you to act as if that's what you're doing as the prospect. And then what I'll go over is the scripting in order to handle that, because sometimes these early objections can really just throw us off kilter. How do we deal with them? You know, are they really not interested? So let's say I'm introducing myself. Hey, my name is David Duford. Jason, pleasure to meet you. I'm a insurance agent. I help people with their final expenses. Thank you so much for having me. And then you go ahead and kind of give me some kind of knee-jerk objection that you think you would hear.
And now, why are you calling again, Dave? I'm getting ready to walk out the door. And what are you calling for again?
So let's imagine we're in person, face to face, not over the phone.
Okay, I thought we were doing a phone deal.
That's okay. That's okay.
Well, I'm here. I'm glad you're here. Appreciate you coming by. I'm here just to learn some basic information and take it and think about it and shop around.
Perfect. Well, thank you so much for the opportunity. So my first question for you is, what were your thoughts, concerns when you decided to send this information in? So we'll stop there, Jason. So the key way to handle any kind of knee-jerk objection is, if at all possible, don't address it. Okay, so why is that? Well, when you meet with somebody, let's think about this. You've just sat down with them for a couple of minutes. You maybe have chit-chatted a little bit, and they're expressing an opinion that how substantiated is it? I mean, Jason, do your clients know when you go in to talk about insurance? Do they know the details? Do they know all the different moving parts of how things work?
No.
No, they don't know anything. They're making a presumption, right? And many times that presumption I think is based off of the worry or the kind of general resistance against somebody selling them. Maybe they've got an issue with salespeople, and they just have to say that to kind of like a pressure valve release, if you will. So the key thing there is to, first of all, understand they don't know what they're talking about. We don't want to tell them that and piss them off. But what we do want to do is acknowledge it to the slightest extent possible and just continue to do what we do. It's only after you deliver an entire sales presentation, in my opinion, that you are in a situation where you can effectively deal with a possibly realer objection. Once they know how it works, you've explained the differences, you've positioned yourself, you've explained the program and the pricing, that's when you might have a better chance, or I should say have a better quality objection from the prospect. But the early ones on, it doesn't matter if they say, I don't buy, I only have 5 minutes before I have to go, I never buy in the first call, I'll need to think about it, pray about it, talk to my kids about it. Just simply say, hey, that's fine. So let me ask you this, and go right back to your script. Shouldn't take any more time to address those kind of objections. Jason, you got any questions about that? I appreciate you doing that.
No, not at all. I appreciate you sharing that.
Sure, man. Thank you. So let's move on to some objections that we'll hear through the pre-qualification stage. So again, if you're new to the final expense process, or really just insurance sales process, I teach insurance selling in 4 steps. First is the introduction rapport. That's where you introduce yourself, build a little bit of credibility and trust with the client. The second step is the pre-qualification and fact-finding step. That's where we really figure out if our lead is a qualified prospect or an unqualified suspect. The third step is actually presenting what it is that we do and kind of showing the difference and how ours is superior. And then the last step is closing and then dealing with the final rebuttals or objections. So there are objections you're going to experience in the phase of the pre-qualification. So specifically speaking of final expense, although most products will fit this as well, with final expense, our pre-qualification criteria is need, want, health, bank, and budget. And usually need and want, you don't get an objection. Sometimes people say, I don't really need any more. That doesn't mean they won't buy anymore. Sometimes it does. Health objections, people typically give all of their information. If you ask about health, there's not a lot of resistance there at that point, because they expect that in this kind of sales call, or, talking about insurance and health and stuff. But where you get the objections more than anything is going to be in the bank draft question and then the budget question. So by bank draft question, we need to know if we can bank draft a client. We need to know if they've got a bank account. And we need to know that they're 100% on board, that they'll actually do this from a bank draft perspective. Why? Because it's very rare you'll get a direct bill that successfully drafts. It's rare that you'll get a quarterly bill. You want to try for the quarterly, but if you can't get the draft, but really 98% of your business is going to be bank draft. And you don't want to be in a position where you're running back and forth to the client to get their first premium payment. Many times it's just a way to get rid of you. So you want to qualify that and get buy-in and know how to deal with some of the objections there. So let's start there. I'm going to call on Jonathan. Jonathan, you there?
Yeah, man, I'm here.
Hey, how you doing? Hey, I'm going to call on you because I've got some newer agents in here, and I don't know how well they know the script. So what I'd like to do is kind of just have you play agent and then me play prospect, and then we'll kind of deal with the how to handle the bank draft question. So can you kind of just like start from some point in that process where you start asking about the bank draft, and then I'll give you an objection and we'll kind of see how you do and cover
Yeah. So this is down. This is after the medical questions and right before the budget question, right?
That's right. Correct.
Okay. Hey, David. So the way a lot of these insurance companies work is they like to take the money. We set up an auto draft every single month, so it automatically comes out of your account, so you don't have to worry about paying the bill or it lapsing because of lack of coverage. So we usually set these up for a date in the future up to 30 days ahead of time. Now, do you get your Social Security check every month? Do you get that on one of those little Direct Express cards, or do you get that get that put into your checking account?
I've got a checking account. I bank up the road from here.
Okay, so you do have a checking account.
Yes.
All right. Now, is that a savings account or a checking account that you've got a debit card with and you pay your bills with every month?
Yeah. Off script. Good question. Back on script. No, it's just a regular checking account with checks.
Okay. Do you have that checkbook anywhere where we can get the routing and account information for whenever we go to do the application?
Why do you need my checking information?
Well, so these banks, like I was saying, the insurance companies set these things up to auto draft every single month. So then that way you don't have to worry about it lapsing or forgetting to mail a check in or having it not get there in time. So we just automatically set these things up. We have to send the information in with the application, and all that goes directly to the insurance company, and they're the ones that actually manage the drafts and all that stuff.
Yeah, I hate drafts, man. Like every time I've done a draft, the draft comes out before I get my check, and then I get a chargeback or a chargeback. You will get a chargeback if you do that. But I get an overdraft fee, and I just hate drafts.
I understand. I'm sorry. This is just the way all these insurance companies. Sorry about that. This is just the way that all these insurance companies work now. Is that they all set up on a bank draft and come out monthly, just like your house payment would or your car insurance does. And so you set it up. I've never had any of these insurance companies draft on a day other than the day that you requested. I've never had any of my clients have any problems with that before in the past. So I think you should be good with going with this particular company. And if you ever have any problems in the future, you can always call me, but you should be okay. But we do have to have that in order to be able to get you coverage today.
Great. Okay, so back on script here, or off script here. So let's cover some things Jonathan did here. So the big thing with the draft, at this point, I used to teach this differently, but I changed the strategy. I want to know right up front in this section if they will allow me to bank draft them or not. What I used to do is I would imply there was a bank draft, but it wouldn't be explicit about it. I would say something to the extent of, we can get you a discount if you bank locally or have a Direct Express card. Do you have one? Great. Then I moved on. But then sometimes I would get to the end of the sales call and people were like, why do you want to draft my bank account? My strategy in doing so was the thinking that they're going to have little resistance after spending an hour with me face to face, that it's just, okay, whatever, I'll just do it. So some people compromise on minor issues if they can get their major goal accomplished, meaning got coverage at a good price. However, there would be the occasion where I would run up against a sales objection I couldn't overcome. And there's a percentage of the population, I think it's like this, 10% of the population absolutely loves bank drafts. They want them. They don't want to be billed. They don't want a direct bill to worry about. They're just built that way. There's 10% of the population that absolutely will not bank draft under any circumstances. And it doesn't matter what you say or how you say it. They're just adamantly opposed to it. And there's ways to sell those people. We'll cover that momentarily. Then there's 80% are going to go either way depending on the interaction. So how we set up the bank draft question is tremendous. So what I like to do, a little different than what Jonathan does, I like to say, hey, as far as payment goes, I try to contrast what the old way of doing things is compared to the new way. And so I say, in the old days, the agent used to come by the house, pick up the premium check, and, be back every month. You probably remember your grandma had one like that, agent like that. Well, that is a thing of the past. All the insurance companies now require us to do either a bank draft, or if you've got one of those Direct Express cards, to draft there. We don't need the money today. It would be set up in the future. But which one do you have? Do you have a Direct Express or a checking account? So I phrase it like, the key thing here for me, I think that works well for me at least, is to blame the insurance company. And I think Jonathan did that to a certain extent, where you say something like, hey, it's there. Don't kill the messenger. This is, I understand the resistance to this, but they all do it. They won't even let us send in the direct bill in the vast majority of times. And it's just, this is the only way. But the good news is we can make it make sense. We can hit your account after you get your money, not before. And if it's done the correct way, you won't have these problems. So, and then sometimes you get that objection. I hear it a lot, which is, man, I hate overdraft fees. I used to have this company and they came in and they messed up my bank account. And again, what I've realized, I think the biggest reason that happens is that it could be the power utility people, it could be cable, it could be a host of different companies that do bank drafts. What I've found out is that a lot of them don't do their drafting until they don't understand how to draft seniors correctly. So they draft them before they get their check. And our clients are going to forget in a lot of cases that they hold back so much money every month if their draft comes around the end of the month versus when they get paid, let's say on the 3rd, to hit their accounts on the 3rd, 4th, or 5th. So what I try to explain it to them is I'm like, look, I understand a lot of people complain about the same thing. They've had companies that misdraft them and then they're really mad, and I understand that. The solution is what we do. The solution is we don't take your money until you get your money. And we set that up front. You see it in writing, so you know exactly how it works. So I like that objection rebuttal towards the pricing. I think it does a pretty good job. Jonathan, I got you unmuted again. Do you have any questions? I appreciate you playing along.
No, man. Yeah, you're right. I'm kind of just not in the mindset. I have used that before, like you said.
Yeah.
I've even used the if they push too hard, which I usually don't have anybody push too hard, but I've also used, I don't know if you gave me this or someone else did, but the analogy that they knew someone or had a client who was on direct bill and, went in the hospital. Yes. And,
great point.
Mistake happened and they didn't get their bill paid that month, and then it lapsed, and then they couldn't get coverage. And so this is just to protect them as much as it is us, so on and so forth. But yeah.
Yeah, I'm glad you brought that up. At any point in any of these objections, just as a rule of thumb, is to have some sort of story on hand to explain things, a parable, if you will. That is equally as powerful as any objection rebuttal. Because if you can take a client story that you heard from another agent or even you experience yourself and you can relay it to the client, that's going to have a different impact on them than just reading a script. If you can tell them something real that happened to give them a good reason why to possibly compromise a draft, that's good. So thanks, Jonathan. I appreciate it.
No problem.
Okay, so that handles the bank draft. If you guys got any questions, feel free to unmute yourself, ask me, or you can just chat, leave a comment in the chat, and then I'll be happy to address it publicly. So now that we've dealt with that, the next thing that sometimes you'll experience is a question about how the budget works. So let's see here. Donald, are you there?
Yeah, I am.
Morning. How you doing?
Hey, what's going on, man?
Hey, you want to play agent with me? I don't know how well you've rehearsed this section. This is the budget section. Do you want to go over this with me?
Budget section. Oh, as in what you can afford?
Yeah, exactly.
Yeah, I mean, we can if you want.
Great, thank you. I appreciate it. So here's what I want you to do. Just start somewhere around the budget question, go through the scripting, and then I'll play prospect, give you some resistance, and then we'll get off script and kind of discuss.
Okay. I don't have my actual script pulled up, but yeah, I can wing it if that's okay.
Wing it. Wing it's good. Let's see
All
how
right.
it sounds.
All right, here we
Go ahead.
go. Well, David, we've already gone through a couple of different things and done the rapport, and I like your house and that nice, was that fancy clock, I guess, right behind you? That's a new thing. I like that. That's really cool. So we've been through all that, and then asked you the qualifying questions to see which, what plan you're going to qualify for. And so what I really need to know today, though, David, is if I can get something that actually works for you, something that may be a little better than either your existing insurance or we're going to add on to your existing insurance. Are you able to afford somewhere around the $70 to $80 a month mark? I know that you live on, a budget. Almost everybody does, especially seniors, but we really need to get you around that $70, $80 mark in order to get you, some good coverage so that you can watch after Sarah is your daughter that you mentioned, right?
Yeah, but good Lord, I make $700 a month in disability. I can't afford $80 a month. My cable's $200, priorities and all.
Gotcha. Well, we definitely need to look into getting you some different cable,
Yeah.
But if you can't afford 70 to 80, can I put you down around that 50 to 60 mark, and then we can look in here and see exactly what we can get you?
I might be able to afford $50.
Around 50. Sure. Okay, I'll tell you what I'm going to do then. When we get to the end of this, I'm going to write down 3 different numbers, and I'm going to write down 3 different sets of coverage. And then you can pick. It'll be completely up to you. Because what I don't want to do is I don't want to sell you something today that 6 months from now you have a water heater go out or something like that, and you have an extra bill. You end up canceling it because it doesn't do any good if you just pay it for 6 months and then you cancel on the 7th month. So I'm going to give you 3 different options when we get to the end of this. I'm going to write them down for you, and you can just point to the one that suits you best, and we'll go with that. How's that sound?
Okay, that sounds good.
Good.
So off script here. So a couple of things. Let's talk about what you did right, Donald. So that last bit there is really, really important, which is selling the fact that you're on their side. Okay. A lot of people think that the salesman prospect relationship is adversarial, like we're the enemies. So we want to take steps, and people presume this. So we want to take steps to show how we're actually doing all of this because we want to help them. We want to help them in their favor so they get good quality. So we want to say things like what you described that most salespeople won't say. Like, hey, it's no good for you to pick up this plan if from 6 months from now you decide to let it go.
Yeah.
Why would you do that? It's a waste of money. And if you say those words, you're going to separate yourself out from the average person, because the perception your prospects have is that at any cost do you want to make a sale. Now, we all know that's not true in reality, right? Because if we push hard for the highest dollar sale and we just, headlock them into a close, a lot of those are going to lapse and we're going to be out of the business. So we have to have a sensitivity towards the price, and we want full total buy-in. So I think that little scripting is pivotal. But one little change I would make is I would say that before you offer the 70 to 80 or whatever that top number was.
Okay.
So there's that. Why 70 to 80 a month? Why did you ask that amount?
It's about as much as I thought that most people can afford. And I know you, especially your ride along, have closed a couple of hundred plus amounts lately, but yeah.
So
where should I start?
Yeah. So this is kind of subject to your discretion. I'll tell you what I have heard successful agents do, and I'll tell you what I do. So I learned this strategy. This is called selling the premium. I learned this from a guy named Tim Wenders. For 2 consecutive years, he sold around $35,000 a month in final expense. And this was back in 2009, 2010. So it was unheard of, that kind of volume. And what he would do and his average premium was like $80 a month. So about 1,000 AP, which is, almost double, the average is about 600 or $50 a month. So how did he pull up? And he had, average persistency, average close rate, but his case size was so high that he was able to write a lot more. So how did he do it? Well, his strategy was he would sell the premium. Instead of trying to sell a certain face amount, he would sell what can you afford? And so his script sounded very similar to this, and it went like this. So, Mr. Jones, with all said and done, if I can qualify for a program today, can you afford between $150 to $200 a month? And he would say that with a straight face. And
Right.
as you'll see, if you haven't sold insurance in the field with final expense prospects yet, or if you have, you know that there are people out there who will not pay that much money. So a lot of little old grannies will fall out of their seat with a coronary. At least that's sometimes the perception.
Yeah.
But the thing is, you go into it anticipating that the vast majority say no. And what do? You do exactly what Donald did. You rebuttal it. I don't say rebuttal, but you come back and say, they say, no, I can't afford that much money. That's crazy. You say, that's fine. Not everybody buys those plans, but there's other good plans that you can purchase. If I could qualify for another program, can you afford somewhere in the $100 to $130 a month range? And you keep working down until I'll go down to $10 a month. I want everybody to buy that has a need. But with this method, the strategy, the reason Tim did this is that it gives him the opportunity to get the biggest ones. Like if you're in a close and you write down the 3 options and they pick the third one, the best. So there's good, better, best, right? What's the first thing you think?
Left some money on the table.
There's possibly some money on the table. It's different if they pick the middle or the lower one. Okay, well, I'm in the right range. Because here's what happens, guys. Our clients only know so much as what we show them. If we don't show them bigger numbers, then they don't know that there's bigger numbers. I had a client, quick story, in Whitwell, Tennessee, just over the mountains here. He bought the biggest plan I had ever sold back in 2012. It was for $215 a month with Foresters. And I thought I was high. I was on top of the world. And I called the guy back. And check this out. That whole year passed. He had bought another $200 a month plan. And I was like, how did I miss that? You know what? What? I didn't. But I only asked for that, even though that was a huge amount. He still had the capability to buy more. And then the crazy thing is, I think last year I sold him another like $50,000 or $75,000 in coverage. So he paid another $300, $400, $500 a month. And this is like 6 years later, right? So 8 years maybe. Well, 2019 from 2012. Yeah, 7 years. So this guy had the capacity to buy more. And there are clients that you'll see that if you don't do this, what'll happen is they'll just buy more coverage from somebody else. And that stinks. Most people want to keep their coverage with the same company. That actually is a big motivation to a lot of people. There's a perception that if you have your insurance with the same company, it keeps saying simplify. There's one agent to deal with, one company to call. There's some truth to that. So if you can help that, you definitely want to make sure that you're asking for the highest amount. Now, again, if we don't get it, that's fine, right? Because we back down the numbers. I think it's a lot harder to start low and then to work high than it is vice versa if you have the right scripting. So, Donald, a couple other suggestions. You did a pretty good job going through this on a winging basis. The only suggestion I would make is to butter up the client and make sure they understand that you are on their side and you're not going to overcharge them. So what that script sounds is something like this. So, Mr. Jones, my final question for you is about price. Understand that 9 out of 10 people that I see every single day are on a fixed income. They draw disability or Social Security. They get one check a month. They don't have very much in savings. Bottom line is they can't spend more than necessary, because if they buy something that's too expensive, some agent talks them into something that's too expensive. What do you think is going to happen in 6 months when the heating bill goes through the roof? They're probably going to think about canceling it. And what good is that to you, right? I mean, why would you want a policy to lapse? The whole reason you buy a policy is to make sure your final expenses are protected. And the best policy to buy is the one that's easily affordable. Why? Because that's the one that's going to be there when you most need it. So my question to you is this, Mr. Jones. If I can qualify you for a program today, can you afford somewhere between $150 to $200 a month? So that's how I like to say that script. A couple other things. I usually don't go $150 to $200 a month. I'll admit I have a hard time keeping a straight face when I ask that amount. And I think some level of success in asking that is to be straight laced and a straight delivery. You don't want to be like, have the deer in the headlights look. I feel like I have that when I ask that sometimes. So what I do is I offer $75 to $100, and then I work down from there. So, it's funny. It's not wrong to go all the way. And I think it's arguable that you should, but you've got to be able to deliver it like without, cringing or, having that kind of, wow, that's a lot of money kind of feeling, because you'll be surprised with some of these people. Okay. So, a couple other things. One critique, Donald. When you said you'll show me 3 different prices, was I 100% bought in to some level of budget?
What do you mean?
Right. So let's revisit what we asked. So you said you dropped it from 70 to 100 or whatever, 70 to 80, then down to 50 to 70.
Mm-hmm.
What was my response? Do you remember?
There's no way you can afford that. When I started talking about $80, you live on, your cable bill's $200 a month. You only make $700 a month,
So when you went and asked for 50 to 70, do you remember what my response was there?
I think you said, yeah, we can look at that. Because I said, if we can write down these 3, do you think that's something that you can work with?
Yeah. So, okay. So here's a little bit of fine tuning we need to do. And again, this is personal experience. So what I had said was, I think I could afford that.
Oh, okay.
Now, is I think 100% confidence?
No, it's not a close.
It could be, but if it's sometimes it's how it's said. I think I could afford that. Like, that's kind of like, I don't know. That sounds like I don't know. Or I could probably afford that. What you want to hear is, yes, that works. Yes, I can do $50 a month. Yes.
So how do you reiterate that then and make them confirm?
Great question. So let's, you play prospect, I'll play agent, and we'll run through that. So,
okay.
So Mr. Jones, if you can't, no problem if you can't afford that plan, but if I can find you another plan you can qualify for today, can you afford something between $50 to $70 a month?
I would have to look at it, but I think I can afford that.
Yeah. Okay. So when you say, I think you can afford it, sometimes what I actually experience is that people aren't really 100% sure if they think they can, and that's fine. So what if we showed you some plans in the $30 to $40 range and the $50 range? Would you think one of those would fit your budget if we found what you wanted?
Yeah, that would probably work for me.
So yeah.
You go ahead and back down instead of trying to push for the 50, or would you go ahead and write the $65 plan on your 3, obviously, right?
So yeah, it's a great question. I mean, this part of this is strategic in nature. My strategy in selling is I want people to buy with as least resistance as possible, because the nature of insurance is we're on the hook for 270 days to cover our chargebacks or our advance debt. And grandma can wake up every morning and say, I don't want this anymore.
Yeah.
And what does that depend on? Well, a lot of times it's affordability. And so for me, I want there to be total positive conviction that they can actually easily afford this. So for me personally, I don't make a stand at a certain amount per se at this point, but what I do is offer other options because I want full compliance. Again, I want to know they can afford something for sure. That doesn't mean they won't pick the larger one. Maybe their mind will shift and open up, and as process goes on, they maybe will expand their vision of what they can afford. But I want something that they can agree to on a minimum basis. So yeah, I whenever I get any kind of pushback, even if it's slight like what you did, yeah. I say, hey, everybody who says that isn't 100% sure. Or I say, hey, it sounds like you're not 100% sure about $50 a month. That's fine. What if I showed you something? We can show you the 50, but what if I could show you something at 30 and 40? Would that fit your budget? Yeah. Okay. Now I've got something to operate on. And
but do you think, David, whereas you said, you got the harder close at the 45, let's say, should that be my middle number when I write it down and still write down one that's, because obviously it's going to get them more coverage, So if they decide, oh yeah, I can get 15,000 for this. Oh, well, I didn't know I could get 15,000. You didn't tell me that if I spend 60.
Sure.
You know.
Yeah, sure. So when we did the 50 to 70 range, what I hear when somebody says, I'm not sure if I can afford this, and what I hear is like, that is the upper end of affordability, regardless of what they can buy.
Okay.
And so I craft my 3-option offer with that number at the high end.
Okay.
So I show a 30, 40, 50, and then
Okay.
ask them which fits them best.
And then, Dave, what increments would you go with? You know, a $20, like, can you afford 60 to 80, or can you afford 70 to 80, or does that make a difference?
Yeah, what's the back down numbers?
Yeah, like the bigger gaps. Like you know, actually, somebody just text or chat, whatever. But that's, you know, I've wondered that as well.
Sure.
How far do you back down?
So I like to do $25 increments at the sub 100 level. So if I can qualify for something today, can you afford between $75 and $100 a month? No, fine. What if we could find another plan and it was around 50 to 75 a month? No, fine. What if I could find you another plan between 25 and 40 a month, or 50 a month, or something like that? So I kind of work down like that.
Okay.
There's no right or wrong method here. It all works. You know, the key is conceptually, the key is to set up the script so they know you're on your side, because it buys you the right to ask for a high number without losing credibility, right? Because if you say, hey, I'm not here to overcharge you, and they say, and then you ask $150, $200 a month, cool. We'll just back down, just like we promised we would. So I think it conserves our trust level with them too, which is why I like that script.
Okay.
Last point, very important point to include in this script. If I can qualify for a program today, okay, you have to be explicit. You cannot say, if I can qualify for a program, can you afford $80 to $100 a month? I've had people say, yeah, absolutely. And then we get to the close and they're like, well, I can afford this once I pay my car off in 6 months. I'm like, well, you can't afford it, really, you know? But that's because I wasn't explicitly saying, yes, this is something you can afford. I was just presuming that they said, yes, today I can afford it, but we didn't. So always make sure you say today. That just puts a slightly higher level of qualification. And if they object and say, well, no, I can't afford it today, you ask why, and maybe it'll be like, I'm out of money right now. And be like, great, well, I don't take money anyway today either. We just get you qualified. So if we can start it next month, can we get you at this price range?
Yeah. So
you can address some of those objections that may come up when you say today. But there are just some people who they hear something differently. With the communication's always subject to interpretation, even with what we normally think would be clear words. So we want to add in that extra today. I think that makes a big difference.
Gotcha. And the most you can defer a payment for a policy is 30 days, right?
Okay. So depends on the policy. So we learned yesterday that Prosperity Life will defer payments to 35 days out. So that's nice, because if you let's say it's the first of the month and they don't want to draft on the 3rd, they want to draft on the next month on the 3rd. Well, Prosperity will give you that much time to do so. So you're not putting a lot of stress on them to take the money real quick if they don't want that. Trinity Family Benefit will do 45 days out. That's super useful. Great Western will do 45 days out. If you guys know of any other carriers that do a little bit longer rate of time for the first draft, let me know. Chat it, put it in the chat, or just pipe up. My experience is pretty much everybody else is 30 days out. So, and that works most of the time. But there's going to be those weird situations where it's nice to have something like Prosperity or Trinity or Great Western in your bag to cover the difference. All right, Donald, thank you very much, man. Appreciate it. Let me go to this chat question here. Jason says, many times I think our next downward lower range may be too wide and we leave money on the table. Jason, you're still here? I don't think you are. I think you jumped up. Oh, there you are. Okay. Jason, I got you off of mute. You want to explain how you mean by that?
I think you guys covered it a minute ago. I just think that psychologically, we and potentially the prospect, when we give them 50, 75, 100, they kind of gravitate to that number. And if I can get them outside of that mindset, say 60, if I think they're working downward is 60, well, obviously that's 15% more than 50 or whatever the math would be.
Okay. I see.
I kind of get them off that psychological bracket was what I was suggesting. And I was just going to get the group's thoughts on that.
I think that's a good point. I bet that I don't know what people think, but I'm sure some people have a number in mind that the ones that are most interested. I want to pay. I can afford about $50 a month. Oh, I can afford about $100. That sounds about right to me. You know, so they do kind of have those kind of firm numbers in mind. So
yeah, that's what I'm suggesting. So I think if you can, every time you can move them up a little bracket, you know, 20, 30%, even though they're not going 50, 75 to 100, in between that is good for them and can be good for us.
So there's another, you reminded me of another cool little couple of scripting. So yeah, you're saying like first, like instead of 75 to 100, maybe 80 to 110.
Yeah, something that throws it off that they're going to gravitate to either the higher or the lower. And usually psychologically, I find them don't want to go toward the lower. They just kind of go that way.
Yeah. I agree.
Hey, Dave, I think your script, if I remember correctly, because I think I've printed off and that's what I use, I think your script actually says 80 to 100, and then you step down to 60 to 80, 40 to 60.
I love that.
Yeah, I think that's actually what you actually teach and on your script, but I could be wrong. That's usually what I do, is go by those increments like that. I usually don't go start over. My start's usually 80 to 100, and then I work it down like that.
And I kind of play it by the client a lot of times too. If I get a feel for, well, maybe a 70 instead of 60 or 50, if I can read into that, or I'll give them a bracket that I try to work 10 or 15 more dollars into the deal, and it doesn't seem to be painful for them.
If I usually
giving them that $50.
If I get them like how David and them were doing, where they kind of go, like if I say between 40 and 60, and they're like, you know, not much more than 40, then I might do between 30 and 40. You know, then I start if I step it down, I want them to say yes, like he says, get them to say yes, but I don't do big steps. I go a lot smaller at that point because I know I'm right around where they think they can afford it.
I agree with that.
Yeah, I'd like to.
Dave, you said you had something from an old script that you were looking up just now. Did you find anything there, or a thought that it prompted?
So first, to address the scripting, if I said the 80 to 100, it wasn't because of some genius insight that I had. It was just just numbers that I kind of picked out of the ether. So, but I think the way Jason explains it makes it sound that much better. So, as far as so here's a little added possible way to upsell your clients. Now, you wouldn't do this here, but you would do this at the end of the call once you've gotten everything taken care of. So I learned this from a good agent, long time in the business, named Travis Tubbs. He's out of Gas City, Indiana. And what he would do is he would round the premiums up. So his thought process was this. Let's say, the $10,000 plan's $56.25. He thinks that our clients, and I think he's got a point, do better with round numbers. They can budget it better. They know that it's going to be, a $60 a month amount would be better than some oddball $56.25 or whatever. So what he would do, he would just say, okay, so which one of these do you prefer? Oh, I want the 10,000 at $56.25. Great. Well, why don't we do this? A lot of people I deal with, it can afford, a lot of people I deal with prefer to have round numbers. It just makes it easier to budget. Let's just round this up to 60. It'd probably give you about 10,500, 10,700, whatever. But at least that you've got a round number that you're dealing with, okay? So it's kind of like an assumed close. And it may not sound like a lot, but, if we do the math here, and let's say we add another $4 in premium on our cases, it's probably at our commission level should be another $100. No, it should be another $50 per case. So if we write 5 cases a week, that's $250 is $1,000 a month. That's $12,000 more in income. And if you're on track to $100,000 income, right, and you've added in that much more over the course of a year, that's a 12% increase in your income, all because you've rounded up to an even number that the client probably will appreciate more in handling and have an easier job. Any questions on that from anybody? I mean, there's some techniques you can use like this, rounding up. Oh, by the way, the old Columbo close, after you close on this and you get signed up, do you want to add in coverage for your grandkids? I ran some numbers here, and, we could do Mutual of Omaha's and get your 3 grandkids covered for $12 a month for $5,000 each. You want to add that in? So there's some kind of easy ways that you can bump up the premium a little bit, but then if you do that consistently, you can measurably have a much higher level of application load, but also a much higher level of premium on the books, which means more commissions for you. So, but again, I like those techniques at the end of the sales call. I don't round up at the budget, because I just want them to agree, yes, I can afford this range, and then I'll put the works in later. What was the last thing? Oh, let me express the obvious here. We round up. We don't round down. All right. So if it's 51.25, we round up to 55. All right. In case somebody thought, oh, well, those go right down to no, round up. Okay. So, great. Excellent. Okay. So I think it's funny. All these scripting things we do tend to be different than what I had in my mind, but I think we had some good value today. We're at the tail end of this, and I'm going to wrap things up. We talked a lot about the objections that we experience commonly in the initial phases of the sales call. What I'm going to do on Friday is go into the closing objections, the presumptions of what happens when you do everything right and you still get resistance at the end, and you learn how to handle that stuff. So if you'll join me Friday at 12 p.m. Eastern, 9 a.m. Pacific, I will go ahead and do the same thing here today. We'll do some objection rebuttals and dealing with closing the sales call. So last call for questions. Anybody have any more comments, questions? Thank you, Arun. Appreciate it. Happy to take any at all.
Hey, one question, David.
Yeah. Hey, John, what's up?
Yeah, you said at one point that you'd say, all right, if I can get you $70 a month, will you buy today? At what point is that? Right after you do the budget?
Yeah. So let me see, access my memory files here. So we're in the pre-qualification stage.
Right.
So we've asked, why did you send this card back? Why do you need life insurance? Blah, 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 blah. We've established need and want. Then we talked about health questions, right? So we gathered the health information.
Right.
Then we asked that budget question we talked about earlier. I should say budget, bank draft question earlier. At that point, that's when I say, here's my final question, Mr. Jones. And then I go into my script. And I say all that stuff with the final part being, if I can qualify you for a program today, can you afford between $80 to $100 a month?
Okay, I get it.
Great. Okay.
Thanks.
You're welcome, John. Thanks for joining. All right, ladies and gentlemen, thank you very much for being on. If I can do anything for you, please holler at me. I'll be around all day long to help you out. So thanks for joining. Yeah, Jake. Hey, what's up?
Thank you, man. Oh, I was just saying thank you.
Yeah.
Excellent. Appreciate it.
All right, guys, we'll see you later. Thanks again. Oh, and a recording of this will be put up into the group me if you'd like to see it. It's probably about 30 minutes to an hour.